Hello guys and welcome to the PiG Daily, episode number 15, Masa's Tank-Liberator TvP. Today is the 3rd of June, 2016, and today is the very first Terran-focused episode, which is kind of scary for me because I'm very new to learning Terran. I think I started learning them at the start of last week. I've put in quite a few ladder sessions with them, but being such a mechanically demanding race, I'm still pretty basic, and the vast majority of our experience playing them has basically been revolving around Marines and medevacs. That being said, we are about, roughly mid-master on NA at the moment. We've played our first GM players yesterday when we were laddering T, or the day before that. So our Terran, it's starting to improve little bit by little bit. We're still working on the basics, but we have been analyzing a lot of games. We've been looking at a lot of pro matches, and our Protoss is definitely better than our Terran right now. But in this episode, I figured, it's time. It's time for us to look at a Terran build, break it down. But that's why we've got this disclaimer at the start, and we're like, it's not going to be perfect. We're going to make mistakes. There's going to be things which we miss. There's going to be details we don't know. However, that's why today's format is going to be very much just a build order review. I've been doing a lot of conceptual episodes where we talk about how to think about this situation in the game in terms of having like a sort of like structure for thinking about situations or dealing with all-ins or adjusting your economy. But we haven't really done a lot of just talking about builds and how to play certain styles within the framework of a certain matchup. And that's what I want to do today. So we're going to be talking about Masa's Tank-Liberator TvP, and it's a very kind of defensive, turtle-y, early game style, something which is quite reminiscent of how TY often plays, where because there are so many scary options that Protoss has against Terran, things like Warp Prisms just dropping Adepts and doing a big warp in and killing you with 7-gate Warp Prism Adept, DT drops, where obviously the DTs kind of have blink if you've got a Warp Prism with them, where the DTs can run into the middle line, kill 3 SCVs, the Bio can stim, and the Warp Prism can just pick it up and fly away. So there's lots of like weird types of aggression which have been coming out, and we've been seeing in Korea and just amongst all the top Terrans them looking for ways to lock their stuff down. Now in the series we're going to be watching, it's going to be Masa vs Puck from the round of 32 of DreamHack Tours. It was a really tough draw for both of them because either one of them could have gone really far. Masa actually ended up top 4 at that tournament, and he also ended up top 4 at Austin the week before as well. I'm pretty sure it was semifinals of both of those tournaments, yeah, because he wasn't in the finals, but he made it to the semis of both. So Masa's basically the top performing Terran right now. He's a very good player, so yeah, let's dive into game. Let's basically just walk through the build order, talk about some of its strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to be looking at 2 games of it, one where it works, one where it doesn't, and we're going to be talking about the difference in those games. So let's dive on in and take a look. Also, today's episode, we're going to try and make it a little bit shorter. We don't want it to go for quite as long. So we're going to try and make it just a little bit shorter. We're going to try and go down to about 40 minutes. Maybe even less than that, depending on how much we have to say. And yeah, that should be great. Alright, so like I said, we're very much focusing on the build order. We're going to start out on Dusk Towers here. This was map 1 in their series. And what we're really looking for is, how does the build work? We're going to talk about that, but most importantly, what is the build order? Throughout the early phase, let's just walk through. It's a very simple opening. Normally it's either barracks, gas, or in this case we actually see gas first out of Masa. So he does have a few different ways he can open up with it. And he does like to open up with a fast Reaper most of the time to try and get some scouting and get an idea of what's going on. So that's what he's going to be going for. If we just zoom through the beginning, completing that wall off there, while looking to go for that fast command center. So this is a very early Reaper, and the reason... There we go. A bit of a cute block there from Puck. Gonna get the command center down anyway. So the reason going for this Reaper is quite nice, is that Reaper is definitely going to get in there very early on, and it's going to get like a full scout of what's going on in the main base. I do find it a little bit interesting that Masa sends the SCV out ahead of time, considering he's going for such a fast Reaper. But he's just going to be able to scout all the way around, check to make sure there's no funny business going on, and have a good look. Behind this, it's always going to be a reactor and a factory. There are situations where you could go for a faster tech lab, but for the most part, just reactor factory. And he's just going to rush out 2 Hellions really quickly. And these 2 Hellions do a really good job of defending through aggression, as well as getting scouting information. You're almost always going to be able to just try and dart on through there, because you are hitting such a fast timing with those. You're hoping to get some damage done, but at the very least you'll get a scout at this crucial time. Where right around now, there should be the tech down. So the Reaper jumps in from the cliff and goes that way. The Hellions go that way. There was actually very good defense here by Puck. As a result, he shuts it down. It doesn't even work too well here. Masa doesn't get as much info as he'd like. He would love to see all back at the back of the base. Instead, all he sees is the Robo and a few Stalkers out. But Masa's just going to build a Widow Mine out of the factory, then a Tech Lab. He's gone straight into a Starport immediately after the factory, and immediately queuing up a Liberator. Now, there's very few maps where a Liberator isn't worthwhile, but especially on Dusk Towers, you really want to be using this this Liberator. We're also going to be looking at a game on Frozen Frozen Temple, where a Liberator is exceptionally powerful. But he's going to go up there, and that Liberator is going to abuse the spot on the back, where it's very difficult, if not impossible, to hit that Liberator. Behind this, we can already see what is Masa thinking about. So with his build, he always follows this sort of structure of going straight up to siege tanks. And this is exactly like, no matter what, his plan is to get siege tanks. Why? Because he's building a fast economy. He's got a 3rd command center down at about 4 minutes. He's gone for that. He's adding 2 more barracks. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. But notice, rather than opting for the stim and combat shields approach to defense, what he's opting for is tanks and a Viking. Now, the Viking's important because he's spotted a robotics, which, as a Terran in the early stages, all you're thinking about is the threat of a warp prism. He doesn't have the information to know if there's 5 more gateways going down, 6 more gateways going down. So he's going to get that Viking, and he knows that's going to really help him shut down any sort of warp prism pressure. Especially because he's going up against Puck. Masa's going to be knowing, what does Puck do? Like 50% of his PVTs, if not more, disruptor drops. Like, Puck just loves disruptor drops. Puck's a player who doesn't really add that much variety to his play in Legacy of the Void. He tends to just kind of do the same thing quite a lot and just be exceptionally good at it. This is that position we were talking about. It's just a really gross position. I think that is actually a bit too close, so if the Stalkers wanted to go in and fight it, they could. But you would lose like 3 Stalkers to kill that Liberator. So this is just a beautiful, disgusting map position, which Terran should always be using. You should always abuse this. Against Zerg, this isn't as effective because Stalkers only have 6 range. Queens have 7. So if the Zerg has plenty of Queens, they can just kind of move in and just shoot it down while transfusing each other, assuming they've done a heavy Queen build. But against Protoss, like, this is just the most brutal thing. And I think even if you had the pylon positioned there, I'm pretty sure they can't reach it, because that Liberator could actually even be like half a hex back and still just barely have range on these 2 patches. So that's really beautiful. Now let's take a look at the setup. Back here, there's always 2 tech labs going down on the next 2 barracks behind this. By the way, guys, the reason I'm not talking about the exact timings of the build is we're just going to post the build We are going to post the build on Team Liquid afterwards. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, build order, here, annotation, something like that. There's going to be a link on your screen for that. If you're watching live on Twitch, just check the Team Liquid thread later and I'll put it up in all its detail. Right now I've just got my own Cliff Notes kind of format, so I'm going to write it up a little bit neater, because anyone reading my horrible notes is probably not going to understand what half of it means, because it's written pretty damn poorly. Oops, there we go. So at this stage, notice Masa's not really looking to put on a lot of aggression. In the second game, we're actually going to see him go for a Widow Mine drop, and then this Liberator pressure. In this game, not at all. He's built a single Widow Mine, which he's just got defending his mineral line. He's just chilling. He's just getting 2 siege tanks out. Sometimes he even builds a 3rd siege tank, though I think he's going to cancel that one. And he's going to get stim. Now, combat shields is usually delayed because you don't have enough gas for it straight away, but this allows you to start building double Marauder at a time pretty quickly. And usually you'll get an engineering bay. Yeah, okay, that is already finished. So we'll be starting +1 probably with our next 100 gas. That should be going down. The important thing though is, here comes this Warp Prism. Now, Puck's invested in Warp Prism speed, he's got a Disruptor and 2 Stalkers in here. This is a pretty brutal drop, but having this Viking here in position, already a missile turret on the left, already a Viking there. It's got a missile turret in the production for DTs. You can just see this setup is so defensive and so focused on just like, I'm not really looking to totally mess up my opponent. I just want to defend. I just want to be very safe and hang on. And we see that Puck actually makes a huge error here and accidentally micros his Disruptor, his Warp Prism forward, thinking he was clicking on his Disruptor shot. And that's really lucky for Masa. Like, that works out great. It's like, oh man, well this is easy. But think about it, even if that wasn't microed forward, that Warp Prism would have to be so afraid. Knowing there's a Viking around, knowing each time it goes in there's a good chance of it getting shut down. And throughout all of Masa's games with this build, he always positions turrets on the edge, specifically so he can have something like a Viking or at least a Liberator on one side checking out for the Warp Prism, and on the other side at least a turret. So that, combined with positioning his units near the edges of his base, always allows him to shut down any sort of Warp Prism pressure, and that's exceptionally important. Because if you think about this style, it's not stim bio yet. The stim's kicking in reasonably late. This isn't like a really fast 3-rack style. He's gone for the, the siege tanks. They're the anchor of his defense. Now, what does siege tanks suck against? Well, if a whole bunch of adepts just warp inside your base behind your wall, suddenly your build's not so strong. But this is I think this is a good style, just in terms of what is this style's focus? This style's focus is being very defensive, very turtley. So the reason I wanted to talk about this rather than a more action-packed build is because I feel like this show and most of our audience, even though there's plenty of Masters players who watch, plenty of even GMs, I know there's a lot of players out there who are going to struggle with the multitasking. If we watch someone like Masa here, when he's like in full-blown multitask drop mode, it's very hard to emulate because he's so damn fast and he's so good with his positioning, his stutter step, his multi-prong. We can all think back to DreamHack Austin, where he somehow beat Firecake's Ultralisks with bio because he just like stutter stepped for like 12 minutes consecutively. It was just ridiculous, It's kind of hard to analyze that and be like, hey guys, just stutter step for 12 minutes. You can do that. Whereas a build like this, I think, is perfect. If you're at a point where most of your opponents on ladder are doing very aggressive builds, you're really struggling to just open up safely, whether it be DTs, people just blinking in on top of your production, Warp Prism drops, whatever the case may be, this build shows a very safe structure for building up your economy. So if you are someone who likes to play that macro game and go to the kind of mid to later stages, this is the perfect build for you. Now, talking about Dust Towers, this map's perfect for a turtley defensive style, right? There's only one entrance to your base, and technically a little bit of cliff they could blink into. So it's very easy for a turtle style to defend here. Siege tanks can cover the whole front. Masa adding another missile turret, just slowly edging his way out. Puck's he's going to be a little bit slow to get out of there. Oh, just barely gets out of there on time. Realizes the turret's about to finish, but Masa does scan that down. And you see, he was actually building Medivacs one at a time before, so notice the starport didn't have an add-on for a long time. Let's go back a little bit. This is an important part of the build. So normally it's about 4 minutes 40, you'd grab the eBay. So the second and third, just to rehash the build, right? So you've got your barracks, factory, so it's Reaper, then factory, reactor. Factory builds a Widow Mine or two. Then it adds the Tech Lab. A starport goes down immediately, builds that Liberator. After that, we go for that 4-minute third command center. Right on about 4 minutes, just before then even. Then you go second and third barracks after that. You're gonna get 2 Tech Labs there. Engineering bay, 4 minutes 40. We're gonna add supply counts and everything in the build order, so you guys get the hang of it. And you're like, okay, that'll make sense. That's all good. But what does this Tech Lab do? Sorry, what does this factory do? So it builds 2 siege tanks, and with Terran build orders, it's so important to watch what your add-ons do. And he is going to cancel that siege tank. He's going to realize, I don't need a 3rd siege tank. Oh, no, he does rebuild it. He actually lost that tank, didn't he? Okay, yeah. I forgot. In this game, he does build the 3rd siege tank. But after that, the factory becomes a macro production building. Now, there's a lot of builds you do this in as Terran, where one of your tech buildings, you get 1 or 2 important tech units out of it, and then it just builds reactors. Reactors take forever to build, so it's very important to get them down earlier rather than later, so that they can have time to kick in and boost your production. The starport actually builds a reactor this game as well, which is a little bit different to into some of the other games. So If Masa went only 2 siege tanks instead, he would have already had this reactor building, and then the starport could have swapped onto that reactor while this factory builds extra reactors for barracks to be built on. So there's all sorts of complex kind of intermingling that can go on in terms of the build order. The important thing though is to build a few of these air units. So the Liberator is important to put that pressure on the back, right? But after that, you need the Viking to defend the Warp Prism. And after that, you need Medivacs out in order to pick up the siege tanks. And you don't really have time to build a reactor there in the middle of that, or you're going to slow down the Liberator getting over there to pressure. You're going to slow down the Viking getting out to defend the Warp Prism. But once you've got those out, it's important to get the reactor down because you want to get up to your about 4 to 6 Medivacs so you can start pumping out your Liberators. And that's what we see Masa doing here. Now, one of the reasons this style is so strong as well is not only because it's good for defending, it's good for turtling, but it's really good against Puck. Puck plays a really weird style of TvP. He plays something not a lot of other players do. He basically just does Blink Disruptor every single game. Now, if we think about how Blink Disruptor works, and we actually talked about this even in PvZ yesterday when we were doing the What If Wednesday, where Harston was saying, disruptors are this great unit if you're attacking, but the moment you're kind of defending and you're fighting in multiple places, it's like, how the hell do you possibly hit anything with these disruptor shots? They just take so much micro. You've got to watch the shots or they're not going to be effective. So you can't just kind of have a disruptor here, a disruptor there, disruptor here, and just kind of defend and macro up. It's almost always a very pushing composition. Maybe as people just get insane mechanics, we're going to see Zest like in a year's time, just like microing disruptors defensively in 4 locations. Maybe we'll see that. But right now, disruptors are like this defense, this very aggressive unit where you want to be forcing your opponent to focus mostly in one area. You push in there, and because your disruptors are a siege unit, they've got great range, massive AoE, and because your full focus is on that one frontal fight, you can micro those shots over and keep picking away at the Terran player, and sometimes just shove in and win the game. And the whole aim with Blink Disruptor is it's not good, the Stalkers aren't good against Bio in a front-on fight, but as long as you've always got at least one Disruptor shot on cooldown, you can just kind of constantly throw these balls out, and the Bio is too busy splitting and spreading to ever actually fight, and that's how Stalker Disruptor beats it. Now what's interesting about the style we're looking at is in the early game we've got 2 or 3 siege tanks to anchor our defense. What that's saying is not only is that good against any sort of conventional push, your Stalkers, your Adepts, or anything like that, but you're also going to be able to zone out Disruptors. Disruptors coming in the front aren't really able to do anything. We see here at this point in the game where it's like, look at this, Puck's just trying to be such a dick. He's like, you don't have, actually he does have stim, doesn't he? This is actually really greedy from Puck getting out here so early. But he's like, let's start picking away, let's start being annoying. But the siege tank range, look at how far that siege tank range goes out. And Puck can't really do anything here. He's like, all right, let's see what we can get. Throw some disruptor shots. Hoping to get maybe an exposed siege tank there. But he has to just pick up a Marine and turn tail and kind of back off. So these tanks really kind of zone out the Stalkers and the Disruptors in this early phase. But then also comes the next step. Why? What is this we have over here? Double gas on your third already. Wow. What is this? A fusion core? A second starport? Oh, I know what you're doing. You're literally just going to rush to range Liberators. So the entire game plan here of Masa is to kind of zone out those Disruptors endlessly. He's saying, you're never going to have the range advantage on me. Even when I'm pushing, it's not just going to be 2 or 3 siege tanks. I'm going to go into Mass Liberator. So thinking back to the build order, let's review this last minute or so. So we've gone up 1, 2, 3 barracks. The factory is building those reactors we were talking about. We then add our 4th and 5th barracks. So these went down, I don't know, what, like 6 minutes, something like that. Basically, you just add those. What did we write down here in our build? Around 7 minutes, but really it's just after you've got, the 3rd CC, the starport producing all that sort of stuff. And after you've got those 4th and 5th barracks, by the way, Masa loves his heavy Marauder play, and we've seen this a lot yesterday in Code as well. A lot of Terran players playing this style. TY as well. Super common. 4 Tech Lab Marauder. Lots of players just getting sick of eating storms, but also let's once more think about, okay, so this is cool. It gives you a beefier composition, not very good at killing Adepts. What does Puck build? Only armored units, stalkers and disruptors. So it's perfect against this style. If you're someone who prefers to play with a few more marines, maybe you're going up against a lot of adepts as well, you want a bit more raw damage output, you could definitely just have reactors on these, and that would be completely fine. But in this scenario against pure blink disruptor, having a heavy marauder composition is really what you want, and that's just going to get the job done. Of course, if Puck were able to get out, swap to charge lots, or and charge lots is probably the best against marauders, I guess. But adepts are decent in that, like, adepts and marauders fighting is one of the stupidest battles you'll ever watch. Like, if you guys have ever seen like just mass adept versus mass marauder, it's so stupid. Like, no one's doing damage to anyone. There's like medevacs healing the marauders, of course. The marauders are kind of like kiting a bit. Both units aren't dying. They're just kind of staring at each other like, hey, is anyone actually going to kill anything soon? And it kind of just drags on out. So generally, you do want to have marines to clear through those sort of units in a timely fashion. But that's something we'll talk about in a different scenario. So let's look here. Starport going down, and then the fusion core. So damn early. And right as we've hit that 4 medevac count, about as many medevacs as we need to heal our army pretty well, already building double Liberator at a time. And obviously we're going to go straight to a tech lab on here and go for that Liberator range as quickly as possible. I mean, Masa's just so defensively focused, hasn't really scouted much at all since that Liberator came in the back. Which, by the way, sat there until this Phoenix was forced out by Puck. Like, he just could not mine from those 2 patches, which is pretty damn sick damage. Denying that for several minutes. And yeah, Masa's just gonna turtle up. So you can already start to think here about, like, well, this is such a defensive build. Only do this if this is something, you're a patient player. It's kind of your style to play like this. Because you're investing in those tanks early, which don't have mobility, and then those ranged liberators, you don't have that maneuverability, which a lot of players crave in TvP, pulling their opponent out of position. And it's only once you get up to about 6, 7 liberators with your army and range kind of kicking in, that you start to be like, hey, I'm going to push out on the map and start to bully. That being said, Masa does feel a bit of pressure to get out on there. He's like, okay, well, I've got to try and slow down Puck's 4th and that sort of thing. I've got to try and do some damage. So he does squeeze a dropout. But he does that while sitting in an exceptionally defensive position. He realizes the moment he moves out with just a couple tanks, a few liberators, and a relatively small bioforce, he knows he's just gonna get surrounded and crushed on, or in this case, disruptor balled and crushed on. Because we've only got 5 barracks production despite being on 3 base. We got those 5 barracks relatively late. We don't have a lot of marines for raw damage output. So all in all, we are in a relatively fragile sort of position. And it's only once you start to kick in the benefits with that Liberator range that your army really takes effect. By the way, guys, if you have any questions as we go, do tag at x5_pig and type those out in chat, and I'll go through and answer those at the end and have a bit of a discussion. As I said, I'm no guru of TvP by any means, or guru of Terran, but it's something where discussion, you guys criticizing, if you think I'm wrong about something, you pointing that out is one of the best ways for me to learn. It's one of the best ways for you guys to learn, just in general in StarCraft. Oh, that's brutal. Gets a disruptor. One of the best things you can do is just always think about those sort of things. How can you discuss this? Whenever you have an idea and you think you're right, argue it with someone. Don't go and say, oh, they're so wrong, I'm gonna go tell my friend how they're so wrong. The best thing you can do is actually debate about it and be like, you're wrong because of this. And the moment you talk like that about things, the moment you actually become much better at understanding the game, because you're forced to defend your ideas. You're forced to actually challenge other people and think about it. Unfortunately, Masa gonna get caught out here. This drop did achieve its goal pretty well though. Oh, and he's actually gonna snipe 2 disruptors down. So not the worst trade in the world. Even gonna get a stalker for his trouble and gets the medevacs out. So that's actually not too bad. And he's already forced Puck, because Puck didn't have any units at home to deal with that double drop. He just went and took a 4th Nexus hidden over here. And at this point in the game, this is where Masa says, alright, it's party time. We've got Liberator range. We have 5 Liberators. 2 more have just popped as well. Should probably bring those up straight away. And now he feels confident that he can start pushing up. Just that extra range on the Liberators means the Stalkers need to come so deep if they want to punish this. And it really does give Masa a lot of leeway. Now, as Puck retreats here, you'll notice Masa's saying, nah-uh, and he's trying to move forward and focus down the Disruptors. Now here, he was a little bit slow to split, takes a pretty nasty hit. But even though the Liberators aren't aren't really in the fight right now. He just wanted to try to punish Puck for retreating. I think it worked out okay. If you wanted to play a bit more conservatively, you don't have the same awesome micro and splitting, you just kind of back off, move the Liberators forward a little bit. But it is important to try and do a bit of that stimming forward and punishing, because otherwise the Protoss can buy so much time. Like, you move forward a little bit, he moves forward, and then you like siege your Liberators and he just pulls out of the circle. And each time he can just pull back and just pull back, and if you're not punishing him for that, then he can slow your push down endlessly. We see here, Puck's being so aggressive with it, and that's slowing it down. It keeps forcing these Liberators to siege up. Whereas if these Liberators are sieged up here, and Puck's army is here, there's just no way to defend. Like, you've got to fight it front on. And that's when the Liberators really just wreck face. So when they force you to fight into them, that's when they absolutely destroy everything. Now, of course, we see on the production tab, there is a counter transition starting to this Tempests. Tempests are the Protoss transition against Liberators. Now, whenever you're looking at this sort of army, you think, okay, Tempests counter Liberators, Disruptors and Stalkers counter the ground units. Really, against this army, it cannot fight against a Protoss army if they can keep up both a high enough Disruptor count to keep back the ground army and a high enough Tempest count to shoot down the Liberators. Now, you're never really going to have 12 Tempests out just shooting these Liberators down really quickly when the Liberators are in high numbers, right? So instead, what we start to think about is the idea of space. What the Protoss really needs, we were talking about it before, is if the Terran forces them to fight, right, then they're screwed. But even when the Protoss gets the counter up to the Liberators, the Tempests, they still need space to get value out of those Tempests. So as the Terran player, it's very much about getting in there and trying to force those fights up in their bases, either before the Protoss gets Tempests out or before they get too many Tempests out. So if there's only one Tempest picking away at your Liberators, he's going to take forever. He's like, and a giant ball of death comes and it like scratches the plating on one Liberator, and you're like, yeah, I don't care. And you just kind of keep walking forwards. But suddenly once there's, 3 Tempests out and they're kind of already out in the middle of the map, every time you move forward, remember your ground army can't really fight without the Liberators sieging up. Like, you will lose to good Disruptor Stalker control. Bio just won't beat it, not if there's enough Disruptors there, because the balls just have such massive AoE. So you need to keep sieging up your Liberators. Each time you siege up your Liberators, your whole army kind of locks down into this like turtle, and you're like, okay. And that gives time for those Tempests with a superior range to shoot down a Liberator, move back, shoot down a Liberator. So the longer it takes you to push across the map, the longer those Tempests are shooting your army, the worse it comes for Terran. So at this point in the game, as Tempests are on the way, or even before Tempests are on the way, but once you've got your army to that strong point, you really have to feel a sense of urgency as Terran. Even though you've turtled so long up to this point, you say, now's my moment. Like, it's all been about getting here efficiently, just defending 3 base. We have to go and not necessarily kill them, but limit their bases, shut down some Nexus, force those fights before he gets up the really ideal army. And that's what we're going to be watching in the next minute or two in this game. So let's zoom into game. And let's take a look. So we're going to zoom out a little bit. And Puck actually gets forced back there a little bit more than he wanted to. But look at this. Masa being very careful, and he's just unsieges 2 Liberators, sieges them further up. Unsiege these 2 Liberators and move them up. Let's see. Oh, he's got, unsieged one on the bottom. Put these ones up, and then unsieges these 3 at the back as those ones siege up. Does cop a blink there. Notice how Puck's trying to do this counter micro. He's trying to use the Disruptor Balls to push back the bio while the Stalkers kill the Liberators as they siege up. But very much like a siege tank push, Masa's just moving his way on up. And we see here, because of the range of the Liberators, the Disruptors can't really get close enough to fully push the bio back. The Stalkers came forward just then. Let's go back a few seconds. And they kill a Liberator. But notice how the Disruptor shot couldn't go far enough back to fully push the bio. So check this out. We're going to see a blink forward. A Liberator goes down. There's actually a really good Disruptor shot there. But about 5 Stalkers and a Disruptor did go down for that. So the trade is actually okay for Masa. There's a very complicated micro dance that happens when you're playing against Stalker Disruptor. Luckily, if you're playing against Storm, your life is a hell of a lot more basic. In my opinion, it's a little bit easier to just kind of spread your units out and move them forward, as Storm has much slower damage output than the Disruptors. However, we can see here Masa is just being very methodical. And we're at that point we were talking about. There's one Tempest just wailing down on your units. However, it's just one Tempest. It's just scratching the Liberators. Right now, Masa needs to feel a sense of urgency. He's got to keep pushing forward, but he has to be methodical about it. So he's moving these Liberators forward just a few at a time. Puck's feeling forced to kind of come in here and slow it down. He keeps having to come in. And notice that Tempest goes down as well. So that's something, if they don't have an Oracle to tag the units or an Observer spotting, the Tempest actually has to come really close, far forward, just to get its shots off. And Puck letting that Tempest get sniped really does hurt him there. So a simple thing you can do as Masa in this position is, if those Tempests are shooting you from far away and you're not tagged by an Oracle, is just scan. Make sure you're killing any Observer watching your army. If you can get rid of the Observers, your life's going to be a hell of a lot easier. And at this point, Masa's just been pushing forward. He's actually sacrificed a lot of Bio and Liberators to get here. And he realizes at this point, wait a second, you don't have a 4th base? And he just says, oh, okay. If you don't have a 4th, I don't have as much pressure to push in. Because even if you're building Tempests, I have so much more money than you. I have my 4th up and mining. I'm in a comfortable economic scenario. And this is where he says, you know what, if I force my way in there, I might take some bad disruptor shots. Let's just take it easy. And I say that, and he moves forward just a little bit more. But he's not going to try and force his way all the way in there anymore. So he's got some Marines and Marauders coming forward, you know, trying to take some good edges. And it's just very methodical the way he moves this. Moves the Liberators forward, stims the Bio forward when Protoss comes in, pulls back to dodge Disruptor Balls, and then keeps moving those Liberators forward. Notice he sends a ranged Liberator into the main. Now this is something you should always be doing with any build in any matchup, even in TvT. On the faraway expansions, like if they don't have missile turrets, adding in a Liberator in late game is like one of the easiest ways to harass, because you can just queue it up and tell it to go siege. And I think if he actually came from a different angle, he might have been able to kind of get the circle. Remember, the circle doesn't need to be this deep. The circle can actually just be there. Like if it just touches the edge, he's still going to kill the probes. And I think it could easily be out of range of those cannons. So this was just, you know, a little bit sloppy from Masa queuing that up in range. But the idea is great. The idea is, you know, attack in multiple locations. And he just continues to push forward here. And even though there's so many bad disruptor shots going down and killing so much bio, Masa's okay with taking these trades, because if Puck ever does engage in the circles, he's screwed. And Masa knows that he has the superior economy right now. He knows he can just keep pushing forward. It's getting to that point though, you know, if they get up to be like 4 or 5 Tempests, suddenly the fights need to happen quicker. And Masa does feel the sand kind of trickling out of the hourglass right now. He's like, I don't think I've really been that cost efficient. We look at the units lost, he's been a bit less cost efficient. He's scanning the army, and he's kind of saying to himself like, wait a second, he will very soon be like, this is actually getting a bit awkward. These Tempests are starting to get a lot of value. So he's going to come forward and try to snipe this Tempest, because he knows if he gets rid of those, you know, it's all going to be fine. But these fights are actually getting worse and worse. So very soon he's going to realize he needs to back off. Now, why is it okay for him to take these fights? Because he knows there's no 4th base. Now what he quickly realizes is, wait a second, there actually is a 4th base, it was just hidden. And he suddenly is going to realize, oh shit, I couldn't necessarily be taking such bad trades. Like, this is actually really awkward. So we're going to see him unsiege, realize like, shit, Puck has more money to work with than we thought. Puck actually even recalls down here because he has to defend this base. And Masa says, look, if I can just thrust on top of this base, get on top of it as quickly as possible, then I can win this game. So he's just going to shove down here as hard as he possibly can. Even though he takes the very cost inefficient trade at the start, the moment he's in a position where Puck has to fight, that's when the fight can go his way. Once again, his Marines jumping on top of the Tempests. The Tempest's a little bit slow to pull back. And Masa's going to make it work out for him. So he gets in there, and even though it's like bad trade, bad trade, bad trade, but the only reason the trades are bad is because Puck refuses to fight in a bad position. How does that affect Puck? Puck is unable to defend his expansions. He is unable to defend his bases. Despite taking more cost-efficient fights, it's just not good enough. Not to mention, the single moment whenever he does actually sit in liberation zones, suddenly he loses so many units. The single moment when there isn't a disruptor ball left on cooldown and the Marauders are shooting his stalkers, he loses the fights absolutely one-sidedly. The Nexus goes down, and look at this. You see, now he says, oh shit, I've lost all my economy. I've got so little mining. If you watch the income, 3,000 minerals a minute to 1,300. Masa has a fifth. Puck doesn't. Puck goes, well, if he's sacrificed so many units cost inefficiently up to this point, I should be able to trade on him now. If I can just crush this army, maybe I can counterattack or rebuild my expansions and win. But remember what we said, the moment he engages into like liberation zones, even if there's only a single liberator here, and the other two liberators setting up during the fight, Puck just doesn't have that much raw firepower. He's got like 10 Stalkers and 4 Tempests. There's nothing that just does that much damage, and he's losing so many valuable units. Puck can't afford these trades, whereas Masa can. What's really interesting, I think, about this game is how Masa, you know, some of the fights didn't look that clean. We see the units lost tab has turned around a little bit now. And, you know, there's always these, like, easy to focus on Terran losing units, but these Protoss units are just so much more valuable. These are just Marines and Marauders, they're cheap. It doesn't look pretty, but at the same time, the moment that you're playing against a player who isn't as careful with their engagements as Puck, your cost efficiency tab is just going to be disgusting with Liberator range. Like, you're going to be so much more efficient. Their army is going to be completely impotent against yours, and things will get really hard. Even there, losing those Liberators, finally getting routed in the middle of the map, it doesn't matter. Masa has income. He's secured the advantage with those ranged Liberators, and he's just got too much stuff. Puck's trying to do a lot with a little. He's got next to no army left, and he just doesn't have much mining. So we've got a triple drop down here to run up here and kill these bases. Meanwhile, a push on the left-hand side. The disruptor shots whiff. There's just too much bio as well, killing the disruptors before the shots even go off. The Vikings kill the Tempests. The economy on the bottom right goes down, and Puck is defeated. Defeated! Alright, GG's. So we saw one game there. Turtling up, getting tanks, getting outranged libs, doing our shit. Seems super safe, seems super solid. Kind of quite advanced when you're pushing the Liberators forward bit by bit. If your opponent's very good with their micro at coming in and sieging it, you might be like, man, this looks like it's incredibly micro intensive. It's like, this is surely too hard for me to execute. But you gotta remember, that all comes down to the skill of your opponent. It's only as difficult to push with Liberator bio as good. It's only as difficult as good as the. My words are failing me. It's only as difficult up to the level of your opponent's Blink micro and Stalker micro and Focus Fire. That sentence was difficult to get out. So if they're at your level, they're not actually going to be that crazy advanced as just going bam, blink forward when you're not watching, kill three Liberators and then pull back out of there. It's not going to end up like that. So it's going to end up pretty well. Just taking a look at my notes. So we talked about how this is super safe versus early aggression. We did see a bit of TY inspiration there, you know, tanks for safety, getting ranged Liberators out, not to mention, of course, the little couple of Hellions at the start, trying to dart on in for the scout plus potential damage. It's a very defensive stance. We talked about that. We're just going to get the next replay loaded up because obviously these are the previous patch. We always get turrets. Not just for Warp Prisms, but also for DTs. There's always a turret in the middle of the production, always a turret at the third. Because it's such a defensive style, you're not getting as much intuitive scouting because you're not out on the map with drops, say, very early, or often you're not even doing anything like a Widow Mine drop. Because of that, you don't get to see things like, hey, I feel like he's missing a few units, or hey, we spotted the Dark Shrine. Masa also doesn't like putting as much energy into scans. He'd rather put it into mules, just have more stuff, and just cover all his bases. Because a scan isn't guaranteed to see what's coming his way. The tanks obviously block the conventional attacks, but they're also really good at zoning out disruptors, which was another bonus against Puck's particular style here. And something we did see was small counter drops as well. Let me just get this game settings fixed up before we dive in. Damaged health bars, flyer helper, yes please. But yeah, we talked about how he's also sending drops out in order to cut out from behind. Remember the moment he got those 2 drops and went out just as he was getting his Liberators up? Because he's got such a defensive stance at home. So he's always looking to poke out on the map, but it's always while maintaining a very defensive, frontal-focused defense. And that is how it does work so damn well. So let's dive on into game number 2 and take a look at it. We have Masa spawning down here on the bottom right-hand side. Now in this game, we're not going to talk about the build as much. We're just going to zoom through it first. This game, it doesn't work. It's very much the same style, but it doesn't work. So that's what we're really looking at. Now, this time around, we didn't see gas first. Did we? Wait, was this gas first? Let me check. Pretty sure this one was barracks gas. Yes, this one was barracks gas. Good. Just wanted to check that. So notice in the previous game, it was gas first. It was like a faster Reaper. This one's just a barracks gas, but he does deny the scouting. So Masa does a really cute little move here where he's like, I don't want you to see what I'm doing. Just starts the depot, doesn't even bother finishing it straight away. And that's because he doesn't actually need to put the minerals into it just yet. He just wants to deny the scout. And that's going to stop Puck from really seeing what's going on. He's just going to say, oh, okay, it wasn't gas first. I see a barracks finishing time. But I don't really know what's going on behind it. Now from here, Masa's going to go into the Reaper. He's going to get that CC down pretty early still. Reaper goes and always checks for proxies. Just such a defensive focus, making sure there's no sneaky business. Just checking for hidden probes that are going to scout, checking for any sort of dirty shenanigans. And obviously it just goes for factory and then reactor and just starts building lots of marines out of that reactor. And Adept comes in, kills an SCV, no big deal. We've got a wall. And there's a Reaper on the watchtower as well. So Masa wants to see, is there anything else coming across the map? And he is going to spot another Adept as well. Now we are going to see him preparing for a Widow Mine drop. A little bit of a divergence. Remember the previous game? We went straight to Tech Lab after one Widow Mine. And we built a Liberator before building a Viking and then medevac production. So there's a bit of room for flex, but nonetheless, always goes for that fast third CC, right about the 4-minute mark. In this case, it was about 340, 345. And just going to be going for that nice double Widow Mine drop around the edge of the map. So just some cute, you know, bit of pressure there, gets a bit of scouting with that as well. Going to come down here and defend his natural just with the Marines and a bunker. We see siege tank production starting up, as well as the Liberator comes out just slightly delayed this time around. Once again, the Warp Prism comes in, but yep, the Liberator plus the Marines get on top of that, and Puck thinks better of it, decides to back on out. We missed the Widow Mine drop, so let's take a look at that. Widow Mine drop always has huge potential. Often these days though, so many players are so on top of it that they've got the Mothership Core on top and they've got an Observer out right away. So only kills 4 probes and a bit of mining time. Not really worth it, but it's not the end of the world either. And yeah, Masa's basically just building tanks. Now obviously we see the 2nd and 3rd barracks go down at this point. 3rd barracks is a little bit late this game. Still seeing 2 siege tanks though. But once again, tech labs. Always tech labs on the next barracks. And quite fast gas. Gonna see that engineering bay? That's been delayed a bit this game because we went for that faster Widow Mine pressure. The timings are slightly different. But you can see that Masa's still going towards the same structure. 2 siege tanks rather than 3 this time. And that factory is going to just be a reactor builder. Reactor builder! There we go. And just medevac production out of this starport. No add-ons for the starport yet. So just 2 medevacs, that way it can move the tanks around, really adjust the defense. And that's what makes you so safe against all-ins. The ability to pick up siege tanks and boost them away really nullifies blink all-ins, it nullifies so many different attacks because those tanks just suddenly become this thing where it's like no matter how your attack works, they're eventually going to get whittled down by this. And he actually builds another Liberator as well. Wait. Did we miss the first Liberator? Yes, we did. Okay, so this is another thing. He loves to just poke with the Liberator, and this is so good. This just has so much damage potential as well. So let's see that Lib. Coming on down. And he just sets it up on the edge. Once again, never gets greedy, always aims for just 2 patches. Now, This is something we're going to mention, an off-topic point, but I actually don't like Puck's pylon positioning there that much, and I'm going to do a whole thing on pylon positioning. We're going to do a whole daily one day. But I do feel like if that pylon was positioned there, it might be a little bit better. However, the problem is that's going to limit your stalker movement a little bit. You'd only be able to fit one stalker below it. So maybe that's the reason why he hasn't opted for it there. But I feel like if you put that pylon directly there, you're going to have much better coverage. Because if you force this Liberator to come up even slightly more to the left, or up here, suddenly you can easily reach it from the ground, right? But this is the sweet spot right there, and that pylon doesn't really do anything to stop it. Even if you put the pylon there, it's still going to be covering this whole area from drops. So I think if Puck puts that pylon there, it's going to be much better against this. That being said, against Zerg, against Protoss, this is one of those sweet, beautiful, beautiful, sexy Liberator spots where very often you're going to find some nice damage. And this, on its own, it's this very small, non-committal pressure. That's all Masa ever commits to with these builds. But it forces a big response, it forces a big reaction, and it has huge damage potential. Look at this. Kills 3 probes, forces lost mining time. And Puck actually needs to come back with his Warp Prism to deal with this. Look at how he has to deal with this. Like, it just disrupts everything. He's like, brings down the Mothership Core, he's like, well, that can't work. And then he has to use Warp Prism Blink Micro in order to actually kill it. So he's actually picking up the Stalkers as they're dying. I think Masa was manually focusing the probes there like a badass, and does get the Liberator out on 12 hit points as well, because that's how Masa rolls. But all that lost mining time, a whole bunch of killed probes, 5 probes, keeps the Liberator alive. That's just fantastic damage. Very, very much worthwhile. So we see Stim on the way now. Now the second barracks is going to add a tech lab. It'll go for combat shields, but before that, you always start +1 weapons before the combat shields. That's just the way the gas order tends to work with this build. And we're going to see this starport. It's built 2 medevacs, or 3 actually, right? Yeah, 3 medevacs, and it's going to build another Liberator, and then swap over onto this reactor that factory is building. Remember, it's a macro reactor. That barracks actually swapped onto the tech lab, just making use of this add-ons. And this macro factory is just going to keep building reactors. That's its job. It says, I don't need more tanks. I don't need more Widow Mines right now. But this is the point where things start to go awry. This time around, it's like, okay, it's been okay. We've done a little bit of harassment damage. We've killed 10 workers. The Widow Mine drop, not so good. The second Liberator there that came in was great. Did some fantastic damage. And it's even getting home. But at this point, you've got that fast third CC. You've got a fully saturated main. You've got a fully saturated... Oh, that's not fully saturated. Where are your SCVs? There's 3 that he's misrallied. And there's a few just building buildings right now. So he's got to get more SCVs down there. But very soon, it's going to be time to land that third. Otherwise, this third command center kind of loses value. It doesn't get to pay off. And even with your very turtly defensive builds, this is always an important part, is where do you secure that economy and get the benefits from that economy? And we're going to reach that point right now. And the first thing we need to think about is this is Frozen Temple. It's not Dusk Towers. Dusk Towers, there was that one entrance. Here on Frozen Temple, that is not the case. Here it is much wider. If we check it out, natural to third, there's a big area to cover here. And there's a big wide open area of attack. There's so many wide open areas which a big bunch of Protoss units can come in from. Suddenly, where do you defend? Now the siege tanks can move forward to the edge of this cliff, but even there they can be exposed. Blink Stalkers can blink on and just snipe them down very quickly. And we're going to see Masa struggle to secure the third base in the next minute or two. At this point, Stim's finishing. Combat shields is well underway. +1's kicking in. Masa's getting a bit of maneuverability. He moves out on the map, loses a Marauder. He says, oh man, you're still just sitting. And he scans the army and goes, okay, how the hell am I going to get out there? Keep in mind, in the previous game on Dust Towers, because the third was already down, what were we doing at this point in the game? Masa was securing those third gases, and that was a vital part of the build. He needed that gas so that right now he could be building the second starport, building the fusion core, getting those range liberators. We also see at this point he's actually building a lot more medevacs than he did in the previous game. He's going up to 5 medevacs, which I find a little bit curious. I think Liberators add so much power to his composition, and he does definitely need their raw damage output to punish any blink-ins. The more Liberators you have kind of overlapping and covering each other with bio underneath, the more punishing it is on Stalkers blinking forward. But we're going to see here, Masa realizes that because his army, you might think, well, you've got Stim, you've got combat shields, you've got mobility. He's only got 24 Marines and 5 Marauders. It's not a lot of bio. It's still very much anchored around these slow positional units, the Liberators and the Siege Tanks. And he has to be very careful going out here. That being said, I would actually argue that he's too careful this game. So let's take a look. Sets up one Liberator down here and stims this bio forward from it, but this other Liberator is kind of back here. He's so paranoid about these tanks being sniped. He's leaving Marines back there, most of his medevacs back there. He doesn't actually have that much firepower up here. The siege tanks, they reach a decent distance. But, I mean, this back siege tank could definitely be moved up. Like, if you're going to have your bio here, you really need it to be supported by these power units. So here's where we start to see Masa falter a bit. He's trying to kind of bait Puck in, trying to bully Puck away just with the threat of the bio. But with this wide open, scary area, he struggles to do it. And we see the Stalkers there find their moment, a beautiful disruptor shot. And this isn't punished hard enough because these tanks take a while to start shooting. The Stalkers can simply walk out of range very easily. They're only barely in range of the second siege tank. And there's a lot of Marines up there that aren't really helping either. If we think about it, if Masa said, this is my strong point, and he committed most of his bio on the low ground, then I think this fight would have worked out a lot better for him. But because he split his units up a little bit, and simply because the way his build works, only having 3 barracks production and all of his barracks being very late with this build, it's something where it's always going to be a little bit awkward at this timing, and this is definitely one of the weaknesses. A map where it's harder to secure the third exposes you right at the point when you need that third base more than anything. Right at the point where you're absolutely desperate to get that gas down. We've seen a second starport finish up now, but we can't really use it. And we've got a bit of gas in the bank, but we need these gases, we need the fusion core. And Masa's just taking too much damage getting to that point. Puck is able to just pick away units little bit by little bit, always keeping at least one disruptor shot on cooldown, forcing all this crazy micro out of Masa. Masa even has to lift the command center. And we see here a big mistake from Masa. Loses 2 medevacs, one of them full of units. Now you might say, well, Masa could have just held it, but these mistakes, you know, if he didn't make these mistakes. But that's StarCraft. There's no such thing as a perfect game of StarCraft. It's a myth. A lot of what you do is playing to the strengths of a map. And what is playing to the strengths of a map? It's making your life easier. If you're doing an aggressive push on a map that's good for aggression, you're making your life easier. Likewise, if you're doing a turtley build like this on a map with a wide open, super exposed third, it does make your life a bit harder. And yes, you can still choose to play these strategies on these maps. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult. You're going to need a bit more refinement and a bit better execution at these key points of the game. We see here, Masa starts to make mistakes because Puck's got so much tempo, even shading some adepts into the natural and starting to kill off some workers. And let's just kind of overview the game from there. Basically, Puck just wastes so much time. Liberator range doesn't start till 10 minutes. The gases are only just going down on the third. Bio continues to get stripped away as Masa struggles with the constant pressure. And things get awkward. Counter drop. This is a great example, though, of what Masa does. Even in the other game, where he wasn't up against the wall, he always squeezes drops out. He always squeezes out some counter aggression. And this double drop, let's go back and actually take a look at it. Comes in here, starts doing some really nice damage. Gets a pylon, gets the robo, kills a stalker. Unfortunately sits in that pylon's range for a bit long, loses a lot of his damage output. But on top of all that, he gets a whole bunch of probe kills. And this is all really nice damage. Gets the mothership core as well. And a total of 8 probes at the end of the day. And gets 1 medevac out. You know, that's a really good trade for Masa. It's those little moves of counter pressure while having an absolutely solid turtley defense at home that gives the strength at style. If he doesn't put any counter pressure on, his opponent could get away with way too much trickiness behind this. Puck could have taken 5 bases and be teching straight to Tempests. Putting on those small bits of counter pressure is an attempt to try and stop that. And it's very important with any style, even if you've got the sickest macro in the world, unless you're able to scout everything that's going on at every single point, your opponent always has the chance to just react and go greedier than you. So whenever you put yourself in a very defensive stance, it's important to either find moments to put on at least small amounts of counter pressure, or to scout very diligently and be able to recognize the moment your opponent's being super greedy and have a set reaction to that. Whether you yourself go greedier or you push out earlier than you normally would, but some way to adapt to that situation. In Masa's case, he just wants to put on these small amounts of pressure, and that's going to allow him to kind of keep his opponent in check, keep an eye on what's going on. What's going on? Getting me British accent out. Don't know why. Another beautiful disruptor shot, you know, Puck taking advantage of the fact that there's just so many angles he can come from. Masa was mostly defending up around there. Comes in, picks off some units, gets some nice trades. Getting his Tempest transition prepared. He's building a few Phoenix, I think, just to shut down... Oh! Range Liberator. Once again, those Range Liberators are just so powerful for denying mining, for pressuring. He actually came in with 2 of them, killed a few probes, he's denying mining, forcing Phoenix production out, while Puck prepares the Tempest transition. Second Stargate and a Fleet Beacon. Once again, Masa, still just turtling, still knowing he can't just fight out in the open. He's got to just send these small squads around. And he's actually doing a really good job, and he makes this game super close. Even though he took so much damage earlier, getting his range libs out was so delayed. He just gets so much damage done with all this counter pressure, and it really is admirable what he manages to achieve in this game. Despite the situation getting so awkward. 20 probes killed. He's got Puck down to 36 probes. Like, this is incredible. Fantastic damage from Masa. Puck is forced to reprobe. Masa starts to push up here, but keep in mind, he's only got 5 Liberators. He's building them 3 at a time, but he's having to float his main down to his 4th. Both players have a bit of a shattered economy right now. And yeah. Accidental double disruptor shot there from Puck. A little bit sloppy. The dance continues. We already talked about this a lot. I'm just going to show you guys how it goes and kind of fast forward. Puck continues to get the superior trades. There's never enough Liberators to do the full leapfrog like he was before. Masa's always finding himself kind of just setting up the Liberators in more of a defensive stance and then trying to poke forward with Bio, but Puck just takes the better end of the trades. There's not enough of these heavy tech units of Masa to actually kind of take those advantageous pressuring positions like he did in the previous game. Still lacking the gas on the 3rd, only mining with 2 there, only just now taking the gases on his 4th. So just never got up to the position where he really wanted to with this style. So even though he did some great counter pressure, he just gets shoved back here, and look at this Disruptor Siege. This is exactly the situation which Masa's build was meant to stop. It was meant to stop the Disruptors being able to come in and constantly pick away at units. He's trying to do a big counter attack over here. You know, use the positioning to win in the game. And yeah, it goes quite well. That Disruptor shot there when he's not looking starts to clean it up. The Tempest coming to clean things up. At the front, he's still being pressured very hard. Quite a few missed Disruptor shots there, and actually losing quite a few Disruptors is Puck, but a decent amount of Bio going down at the same time. Losing some Medevacs and Liberators up there, and Masa's trying to expand to the bottom left-hand side of the map. But this is where DTs come in. Puck's gone. He knows it's a weird low economy game. He's getting DTs out, and this is where Masa's life becomes incredibly difficult. DT's going to come in all the places. More and more engagements on the north side, fighting even without his Liberators once again, going too far forward there, desperate to try and push Puck back, get the pressure off his back. And Puck just kind of pounces on top of that army. He says, man, once your Liberator's dead, you ain't got nothing, brother. And Masa just gets bullied back, loses the base in the bottom left. There's DTs just chilling in all the places. Puck's expanding to the top right, and it's only a matter of time. These Disruptors can just siege him out all day long. Try some more counterattacks. But Puck's just got more stuff. And the GG's finally called. Alright, cool. So we saw there the game didn't work out. The key point, of course, as we said, was around that 7-minute 30 mark, 8-minute mark, where Masa really wants to be getting a third base, and he just couldn't get it. He kept pushing down there, he kept trying to work his way out, but maybe a little bit too afraid to move his tanks a bit further up, maybe just needed to get his Liberators a bit further forward, maybe just needed to bring all of his bio together at the front, and kind of... It's scary, right? It's hard, because you've got to keep your units concentrated in order to have their firepower all in one area. You're trying to rely on your siege units, but then you've also got to stay spread against the disruptor shots. You also want to stay spread out to some extent. You don't want to go in there with all your bio in a clump, not be looking and bam, there goes splat, your whole army's dead to 1 or 2 disruptor shots. But definitely around this stage, at that point, we'll look at it just one more time in game. We saw here Masa just start to lose units a little bit wastefully, and a little bit slow to move his siege tanks up to the northern side of the cliff. Comes up with only part of his bio, and just keeps on skirmishing and taking negative trades. So with this style, even on these scary to take third bases, it is so absolutely necessary that you just push out with your whole army. You can still try to hug a cliff or something like that to use your Liberators and siege tanks to kind of cover like here and here. But you've got to cover both of these areas with Liberators and siege tanks, and you've got to get these gases going on that third base while your bio chills around your strong point. This is something where after Masa lost that first chunk of bio, he never had the bio numbers to properly kind of shove his way forward here. And because he couldn't secure the third gas, he was unable to get his second starport on time. He got the starport, couldn't use it, unable to get the fusion core on time, unable to get the Liberator range, and the entire build became meaningless, because if you can't get the Liberator range up, things start to fall apart pretty quickly. So that kind of sums up this build style. As I said, guys, the build will be linked on Team Liquid back at the start of the VOD. That's linked. I'll be linking it there later today when I post the VODs in the thread, so check that out. Definitely, if you guys have any criticism or questions, shout them out now. I'm going to start answering questions, and we're going to go through this. So I think this was an interesting style we looked at for Terran. First Terran episode. I'm sure I missed quite a few details you guys are going to point out, so please bring your criticisms, throw them at me. It's all a learning process for me, and I didn't really expect this show to be very good at all, so considering my low expectations, I'm actually pretty happy with it. Let's take a look. Still Boyo says, how does this work versus Phoenix openers? Haven't seen it versus Phoenix opener. That's a good question. So let's think about it. Well, you're opening... I mean, the thing is, in both games, Masa was committing something to scout, right? Whether it be the early Reaper Hellion sacrifice in game 1, or in game 2, the Widowmine drop. So usually he's gonna get some idea that there is a Phoenix opener going on, and I'm sure he's going to adjust his play. Now, against a Phoenix opener, depending how early they show themselves, I'm pretty sure he's going to be less worried about the siege tanks necessarily. He's always going to... If it's combined with, say, very fast blink or adept attack speed and some sort of aggressive move, then he is always going to be very on top of his medevacs. So he's going to make sure he always has two things. One, anti-air near his siege tanks for his defense. So he's going to have a clump of Marines there to shoot down Phoenix if they come to pick in the siege tanks. And he's also going to have 2 medevacs there, which he always has. So the medevacs can lift the siege tanks up as the Phoenix get close and then drop them again. So the Phoenix come in, try to lift, and they're like, oh, I can't lift it. The medevac's already picked it up. And the siege tank drops out again. The Phoenix is like, okay, now try to lift it. And in that interim, the Phoenix should be focus fired down by the Marines. Sounds like pretty advanced micro, but usually the Marines will almost always just, like, because this is kind of in the rear end of the fight, they'll probably be auto-focusing the Phoenix anyway, so that should work out. So that's in terms of defending a timing attack. Obviously, you're not going to go for your Liberator pressure if you scout Phoenix. That's just dumb. If you know your opponent's going Phoenix, why would you send a single Liberator in early? So you're going to make that adjustment. What else would you do? Well, Phoenix are annoying for harassment, but hey, we've already got missile turrets. That's already part of Masa's build, so he's already got a bit of anti-air there. It depends, you know, if it's a heavy Phoenix, that's interesting. I'm not 100% sure. Like, the thing is, Marines still kill Phoenix very quickly, and also keep in mind, Liberators wreck Phoenix as well. So if your opponent opens up Phoenix, like, it's not really going to be very good against this, I don't think, because once you get up a decent amount of Liberators, you can just leave, like, a few of them out of Liberation mode, and have some Marines underneath. And unless they've got like an army that just gets on top of you really suddenly, like you should be fine. I'm thinking the nightmare situation would be a lot of adepts shading on top of your army while Phoenix come in at the same time relatively early on, like in the middle stages before you're up to that 170, 180 supply, huge army, 10 plus Liberators, like beautiful army that doesn't give a crap about Phoenix. But in those smaller stages, it might be something where, because it's so fast moving, it actually does just get on top of you and wreck you because you've got a relatively low bio count. So I'm not 100% sure, but I think that about covers that one. Let's take a look further up at X5Pig. Are there any tags? Foverlord says, what's the best way to play against this as Protoss? Okay, that's a really good point. That's something I wanted to talk about, but I actually skimmed over. So that's something which is really good. Luckily, we still have the replay open, at least this second replay. So I'll find a point in there while we discuss this. So there's two things, and I was talking to Puck about these replays before as well. I didn't get a lot of time with him because he had to go pick up his car from the shop. But I was like, okay. I was like, can you just tell me, like with this style, I see it as, they're trying to turtle up and kind of outrange your ability to pressure and then hit you from behind, right? They're trying to really limit your ability to just focus on the front with your disruptors. So we were talking a bit about that specific style, but just in general, the big things which Puck said were, he said, I think I probably could have broken this in some of these games where I didn't. He said, like, he felt like he was committing to a lot of units. So let's go into game. He felt like he was committing to a lot of units, but not necessarily committing as hard as he should have. And he felt like he didn't have as much confidence in this series. He felt like that's part of the reason he lost. It was a 3-2 towards Masa in the end. He said, I felt like I didn't have quite the confidence. He felt like there was some times where he should have just attacked, and he felt like there were weak points where he could have broken Masa, but he didn't necessarily take advantage of them, and he felt like he was a bit too unsure of what he was committing to. And he also said, not only, I was like, oh, so you do feel like you really could break this build? And he was like, yeah, I think I could have, but not just that. It's either I should have broken it or I should have gone Tempest sooner. So Puck was saying, like, look, either you commit hard. In this game, I actually think him not committing hard was the perfect response, and he played it perfectly. But on Dust Towers, for instance, he was kind of doing this pressure and it wasn't achieving anything. He was committing so much to Stalker Disruptor, and his Tempest transition was so slow. This game, it worked out, but the previous game, it didn't. And he was saying, look, either I should have committed harder to, teching up behind it, or harder to attacking. And he felt like he was just kind of too in the middle of the road. We see in this game, it's up at like, 13, 14 minutes, I think, where we see the Tempest transition start. Yeah. This is really the answer to any sort of Liberator style. And the first thing I do, because I love playing Stalker Disruptor. I've started playing a lot more Storm in TvP, though I'm still better at Stalker Disruptor. But like the best thing is when I see someone turtling to Liberators on ladder, because I'm playing crap players who aren't nearly as refined as Masa. So the one thing I notice is they just don't pressure me. All they do is these tiny little drops in Liberator pressures, which is exactly what we've been talking about. They come with like a single Liberator, a single drop with 2 Widow Mines, and I find that's like relatively easy to defend. And the moment I recognize like that's all they're doing, and my observer kind of comes in and scouts like tanks, Liberators, second star, I'm like, okay, I don't even need to see the second starport. Usually if I just see the Liberator count building early, very early on, I'll just be like, okay, either we go and kill them while the count of those units is low, somewhere like where the Liberator count is just at 3 or 4, they don't have that many units, we just go attack with Blink Disruptor, or in the case of Mass Adept Stalker or something like that, or we just get 2 or 3 Stargates down and start pumping out Tempests. I actually saw Probe recently do a really cute way of doing that, where he went only a single Stargate from early in the game, which he had an Oracle out of, and because he was playing Iaguz and he knew Iaguz loved to do this Liberator style, he was like, I'm just going to make a fusion core, a fleet beacon really early, and he just started making Tempest like 8 minutes into the game or something like that, because Iaguz just wasn't pressuring. He's like, well, if you're just going to go to late game, I'll go there as well. And by the time Iaguz was like pushing into the middle of the map, there was already like 3 Tempests just picking away at his Liberators, and an Oracle like tagging the army, and I was like, well, that's just perfect. So any ranged Liberator style like this, I think it's very powerful if you can just get your Tempests out. It does take a bit of advanced micro. You want to have your Tempest on a separate hotkey, and preferably you want to have either observers or an Oracle to spot their army. But then you think about how much in these 2 games we saw Puck fighting to hold back the Terran push, like trying to slow it down. And if he just had Tempest out when the Terran was in the middle of the map, his life would be so much easier, because every time there's a siege and then an unsiege, 1 or 2 Liberators goes down, and suddenly Terran needs to just engage onto Protoss. And that's when you go, I have disruptors or I have Storm, and you kind of like, walk into my Storms, buddy. Walk into my disruptors. I've got AoE. You know, the moment you're forcing that army, that Terran army to attack into you, it loses its strength. Remember what we said, the strength of that Terran army is it's about kind of edging forward, sieging forward, setting up in an annoying position and making you attack into it. The moment it has to just YOLO into you, as long as you got enough splash damage up to clear up the bio, easy life. You just smile to yourself, clap slowly, and you should be good. Only 2 questions today. I would love some more questions from you guys. Please, please do shout out any questions in future using the @x5_pig tag, and we'll see how it goes. All right, guys, I think that's the end of the show. I don't know why I'm talking in so many accents today, but hey, it's Friday. It's the end of the week. So we'll be back with the daily on Monday. So there's a 2-day break, as always, at the end of the week. Allows me to actually put some time into planning and getting everything organized. So yeah, I think that was a pretty good show. Shout out, as always, if you're watching not live, YouTube comments is fine for questions. The best place for like detailed discussion is Team Liquid. So if you're watching on YouTube, just below the video, there's this description bar. Click on that, open it up. There's a link to the thread. There's also a link to the full playlist of Pig Daily episodes as well. Click on the thread, sign up on Team Liquid if you haven't already, and let's have a debate, let's have a conversation, and that should be awesome. If you have any show ideas as well, please shoot them out at me. Next week, we're going to be trying to split the days up and getting like a weekly daily format. So what we're thinking of is doing a sort of Day 9 Daily / Jack Attack, sorry, not Day 9 Daily, Fun Day Monday / Challenge Accepted type show. We'll probably announce the first challenge for that at the start of next week, so we can start actually doing the show the week after. And I think I'm going to combine that with Icy Far, which is obviously my replay show. So I'll announce that all at the start of next week. We're also going to make the weekly show match, the What If Wednesday, a weekly thing. So we're going to do that every Wednesday night for you guys, every Thursday morning for me. And yeah, it should be pretty sweet. So that's the plan. I'm going to try and divide it up. We're also going to start doing beginner basics episodes, where probably 1 day a week, most weeks, we're going to go and look at something from a very fundamental view, really look at the basics from when you're relatively new to the game starting out, and try to give some content for those players. So that's all for now, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Don't forget to hug a cactus, lick a walrus, and of course say hey to your mum for me. That's all for now, guys. Goodbye and good night. That's it.